I want to be able to take this experience that musicians are doing on a daily basis and have the general audience understand what that feels like and how much joy and how much amazing creation and art you can make in an everyday experience by letting other people in and by interacting with them on a level that's comfortable for both of you.
This music is from my next guest, composer and bassist Paul Beaudry. He's developed a way to teach skills to collaborate based on his experiences as a jazz musician. His journey around the world began in the Bay Area of San Francisco. Excited to welcome Paul Beaudry to the program. He's an amazing man. He's a Renaissance man. He's a composer, musician, and a great speaker on a topic we all need to know about today. So thank you for being with us, Paul.
Thank you. It's definitely a pleasure to be here.
What brought you to collaboration? What brought you to want to talk about this?
Well, that's interesting because I have been a professional musician probably 25 years now. And in the process of doing that, and one of the things that attracted me to musicians to begin with is that they seem to be very knowledgeable of things that were happening all over the world. Since they were touring a lot, they were able to see firsthand things that you might not see in a newspaper, even things that might not be written in textbooks. You know, because it's one thing to learn by just, reading the news. It's another thing to actually be standing there and have personal friends in almost every country in the world. And you get a completely different set of information about the kinds of things that are happening worldwide than what might be shown on mainstream media. So that was actually one of the things that attracted me to music in the first place, is how internationally knowledgeable all of these musicians were that would tour frequently. That was part of my attraction to music as a profession. So as I began doing music more and more, I was also internationally traveling. And at this point, I've performed in almost 40 countries. And so I've been able to see firsthand a lot of different wonderful experiences, Saudi Arabia, Jordan, Kazakhstan, India. I can go all the way down the list of different places that I've been to. And in the process of doing that, I noticed very clearly that, people have very different cultural attitudes, even if they begin to look the same. For instance, many teenagers worldwide may look like American teenagers, and they might even listen to hip hop music, even if they're South Korean, but underneath, all of those clothes is going to be somebody who's going to be very culturally South Korean. And so sometimes, even though people might look like, the latest fashion or dressing in a way that might look like acceptable to Western culture, underneath, they have very strong cultural values that have been developed over thousands of years. And so we need to begin to understand where people are coming from. One of the first things that I found was interesting is that we have this thing called the Golden Rule. Do unto others as you would expect them to do unto you, right? And you figure that's the way to treat people the right way. Well, that's a very cultural attitude. What if you don't know how somebody would like to be treated. And so going into the middle of the 21st century now, and we have to start thinking, how do other people want to be treated? And we have to change our golden rule to do unto others as they would like to be done to them, because it might not be what you want. And so you might be thinking that you're doing somebody a favor, and you might actually be doing them a disservice or an insult.
What brings you to the subject of what you call intentional collaboration? What is that?
Well, intentional collaboration comes down to basically methods of listening and appreciating other people for who they are. And for an example, if I'm playing with a group of musicians that I've never played with before, the first thing I need to do is listen. Now, we're all very competent musicians, and people might be at different levels of performance, but there needs to be a sense of like whatever somebody plays, number one, is okay and appropriate in the moment. And then a musician will listen and react to that with something. Another musician will listen and react to that with something. And before you know it, you have this art that's taking place live in the moment in a way that is really profound and touching. And the magical experiences that take place when music is being made is felt by the musicians and the audience. And I think that's one of the reasons why audiences love music so much. It takes you back to an emotional feeling that you're trying to express. And I think music even predates language. You know, we have certain feelings, we're trying to figure out what those feelings are. And then at the very end of communicating those feelings, you come up with language. But those deepest feelings, a lot of times, are reached by music. And so that's one of the reasons why we call music the universal language. You don't need to understand the language of a song to hear the sentiment behind the song. You can love a song and not really be able to understand the words or know what the words are. The song really kind of speaks for itself. And so music reaches people in that way. When I'm collaborating with a group of musicians, someone who's going to play something, I'm going to listen first. I'm not going to think about what I think should happen. I'm going to think about what is happening. And through that collaboration, we will both end up playing something that we have never played before. We're going to create a moment that has never happened before. And that's how we create amazing experiences. And I think personally, one of the highest art forms that does that is jazz. jazz is such an improvisational art form. Even a band that has been playing together for 20 years may not necessarily play the song the same way twice. So there's a lot of listening that goes on. And so if I was to change the name of intentional collaboration, I would call it the art of listening. You know, and intentional collaboration is a method that helps you listen to other people and communicate to them in a way that makes them feel more comfortable to communicate with you.
And you're taking this idea and you're working with people in a general audience to bring the same skill set
That's
to
right.
individuals. Now,
I want to be able to take this experience that musicians are doing on a daily basis and have the general audience understand what that feels like and how much joy and how much amazing creation and art you can make in an everyday experience by letting other people in and by interacting with them on a level that's comfortable for both of you.
Now, how have you used this when you travel? There must be places you land or go or have gone before the pandemic that you run into musicians who don't speak English, but you still have to play with them. Am I correct about that?
You are absolutely correct about that. Now, one of the things that does happen in jazz is that most professional musicians have to know, I want to say about 500 songs altogether. So I can go into a bar in Tokyo or any performance venue in India or in Africa or anywhere, and I might not be able to speak the language there, but if we know the same songs, somebody can start playing and someone says, wow, I know that song. More likely than not, they're not playing the song in the same way that you do. And so that's where your ears have to come in and say, okay, let me try to fit what I'm doing into what they're doing. As I begin to do self-adjustment, they begin to do self-adjustment. And it doesn't take very long before we do something that neither one of us has ever done before. And that's how these beautiful experiences are created. It might put me into a more creative direction. And then I might remember that next time around and say, oh, I remember what we played at that space in India. I remember what we played at that space in Africa. Let me bring that into my next experience. And so as you have more and more of these experiences, you take them with you. It makes you a much more of a rich human being and just a richer life experience to have all these things to draw upon that just made you a bigger person.
That's an amazing thought. That is so powerful. How much we miss by not having those experiences, and you want to give them to people. Are there rules about who speaks first or who speaks second? Was that something you feel out, or when you're playing, who goes? I always wonder when I'm listening to a jazz performance, how do they know whose turn it is to go?
That's interesting. So what happens in a jazz performance, a lot of the communication is visual as much as it is auditory. So the musicians may or may not have had a chance to talk to each other before the song started. So nobody really knows what's going to happen next. And then by, let's say somebody's past experience of all the records that they've listened to, they say, I think this person is playing something that I've heard on this Oscar Peterson record or on this John Coltrane record. Let me try to play that. And then if it doesn't work, you can say, well, let me try to play this, or let me try to play that. And this thing keeps happening until you finally get a lock. Now, it might also take place that neither musician has common references. And in that case, it could still work out if you just listen, because at the end of the day, listening is going to be what really guides what takes place. Even if you don't have the same references, you can still use your empathy, and you're using your brain, and you're saying, okay, I want to create something new. I am asserting myself, but we're doing it together. We're both asserting ourselves, and we're creating something in the moment, in the spot. And actually, the more different the other person is, the more beautiful the experience is, and the more rich it becomes for both of you, because you say, wow, I would have never thought to play that way. I would have never thought of that phrase that you just played. I've never heard that phrase that you just played. What were you doing? And it's amazing the amount of conversation that can take place afterwards could
Oh,
just be life-changing. Or you might have gone into an experience thinking that you know the things that you need to know, that you have the experience, and then you come out of that experience saying, wow, okay, what was that? What did you just do? And there's a lot of conversation and information sharing that takes place. This happens a lot in doing these international performances with musicians I've never played before. And then it is not uncommon at all for me to come home and study that person's culture for sometimes a year. I remember when I first went to India, and we were collaborating with some Indian musicians, and I've always heard Indian music, but I had never really like studied it. I had the best time just listening to almost nothing but Indian music for an entire year, and then, while doing that, I'm learning about the connections between that and Pakistan and, Bangladesh and the entire region, and how Gandhi was trying to put a united country together. It ends up going into many, many different parts of history, not just, so the musical exchange only becomes a catalyst for a curiosity that can last quite a long time. And it never really ends, because I might still, listen to some new Indian stuff, and now I have a body of references that I could use. And this could take place in several areas: Middle Eastern music, Eastern European music, definitely Africa and Latin American music. I've read so many books about history of those areas because I wanted to communicate with those musicians on a deeper level. I wanted to understand where they were coming from. But it was music that was the catalyst for my drive. It was music that was the catalyst for my curiosity to say, who are you? What are you doing? That's amazing. What is that? What inspired you to do that? I want to know that. And so it just becomes this huge, for me, it's a giant curiosity and an ongoing study.
well, as you know, especially being an American black man in this country, you must see that conflict and solving the areas of conflict in our country are very important. How has it been for you as a man here, as an American man here in this country? Does your life mirror some of the same experiences that have been in the news?
Well, I do have to say that I've always been attracted to diversity, but the international experiences made those differences even bigger. And one area of the world that touched me the most was in Central America, in Guatemala in particular. I was doing some concerts there, and I really wanted to do more for the area. And as I began to study the people and the history, I came back and I said, you know what? Many of those conflicts are taking place right here in New York City. Many of these conflicts take place in every city. You don't have to go to another country. You can just go right in your community, in your neighborhood, your schools, your place of work, and you can start that collaboration process right there. After looking at all these different things, I started realizing that these miscommunications, these missed opportunities for connection are daily and everywhere. And so they might even take place within a family. I think it's important to know that, when we're in mainstream society, sometimes we need to act a certain way, and then at home we need to act a different way. And so it's about bridging the gap. It's about understanding how to communicate with other people in a way that's comfortable for them. It's about communicating with my family in a way that's comfortable for my family. And I think the more we can appreciate each other's history in particular, the more we can respect the other people that we come in contact with. I think we're going through a great awakening at the moment. I've had many friends of mine call me and say, you know what, I never looked at the world through your point of view before. We've seen all these viral videos of what it was like to be an African American point of view, and somebody might say something. And now that the video is out there, you can see that's ridiculous. You know, I don't think anybody really took the time to know what it was like to be on the other side. And so I'm excited about the awakening that's taking place right now. And the more that we can raise awareness, the more we can have respect for other people and putting ourselves in other people's shoes to say, well, what does that interaction I'm having right now look like from their point of view? What are their feelings as I am saying these particular things, and how is that being received? I love that. I love the fact that we are putting our communication in, from the eyes of the other person to say how we are being received. And so I think it's been a little unsettling for a lot of people, but I think this is progress. Maybe this is what needed to happen, but this is definitely progress.
Yeah, it's a very expensive loss, though. I mean, that we've lost so many Black men and women to violence. Yes, an awakening has occurred, but it's a very steep price for that awakening. I don't sense any anger coming out of you. Do you have any anger that is based on your societal experience? And I'm not looking for you to get angry. I just want to know how you've dealt with it, because having to perform even when someone has, stepped on your feelings is a tough thing.
Well, my first college degree was in computer science. And I want to start with that because I grew up in the Bay Area. Technology was growing, and learning how to do computer programming was like a neighborhood thing, along with playing basketball and football and other things. And we were hearing stories of guys like Steve Jobs and Bill Gates, who started a computer company out of nothing. There was this nice sense that, wow, this could be the great equalizer. You don't necessarily have to come from old money to be a part of a higher class, So you can have social mobility through your own efforts through this new avenue called technology. And I thought that was wonderful. I think this is great. So I was accepted to California Polytechnic State University, got a full scholarship to study computer science. And my first day of school, I was taking a math course, and they were talking about, mathematics and the roots of math, and how the roots of math took place in Greece. And I was thinking, like, well, wait a second, they've had pyramids in Egypt for 5,000 years. How could the Egyptians have not known about geometry? And then you look at Latin America, who also have had these pyramids for 3,000 or 4,000 years. I think we don't really know the exact original dates. And so why is it that I'm taking a math course and they're not even bringing up the history of Latin American people, of Native Americans, of African people? And I noticed my anger started then. Like, oh wow, the history has been erased. I wonder what they would think of people of color if they actually had the facts. Now, obviously, you must have some knowledge of mathematics and geometry to create structures that have been standing for 3,000 or 4,000 years, maybe longer. And so I began to look at this in a different way, and I pull people aside and I try to educate people about background. I think it's important to educate about things that did happen. Your point of view of someone will change dramatically when you know their story, what they've been through. And I noticed, interestingly enough, every time I talk to a new person, they have a story. To listen to that story is absolutely fascinating. If you think that you've been through a lot of struggle, you are going to meet somebody who's been through even more struggle than that, and you will have an appreciation for that person. And so I want to say that, I was out there protesting many, many times over the last 40 years. I shouldn't say 40, probably 30 is a little more accurate. But I found that I can put my energy into two different ways. Yes, I can be there and do that, but what are we going to? Where is that energy going to land? Now, after you've, voiced your concern, which I think is important, now what? What are we going to put that energy in? So I noticed specifically in the last 4 years, that I wanted to put my energy into something that people can do, not just something that people can be upset about. And so my near obsession has been, what can we create that will be better than what we're being upset about right now? And so my drive was, yes, I might be there for some of these protests, but I'm going to work 4 times harder to try to create a system that will be what we actually want. And so that's been my drive. That's how I've directed most of my anger. I've tried to create with that energy.
And I think you've demonstrated a powerful model to do that. We've been talking with Paul Beaudry. He's an extraordinary musician. We'll play a little bit of his music so you get the idea. And I just thank you, Paul, for your time. I look forward to further collaboration with you. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
That was excellent.
Join us for Profunda TV on PrincetonTV.org.